Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about the TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Cloak and Dagger. A lot of great things went down in this episode, so let's break everything down. Well, first of all, let's focus on Tandy's side of things, which is kind of interesting because obviously this is the 8-year anniversary of both Nathan and Billy dying. And for one, it's kind of interesting what they did with this. They kind of gave you a little more context of a lot of stuff connected to both Ty and Tandy from around that time. But we'll kind of dissect that in a little bit. But first of all, we have Tandy. It's kind of interesting because for one, her mom actually looks a lot better. Her mom doesn't seem like she's drinking as much. And she looks good, after everything that's kind of happened. And on top of that, because Tandy went to go visit Ivan, and who, lo and behold, pops up as Peter. I don't know if he realized necessarily who she was when she came visiting Ivan. Maybe by then he had already looked her up and found out exactly who she was. Because later on in the confrontation, it seemed like he was just kind of like, maybe he already knew who she was. Like maybe at that point, it's like, oh, I know who you are now. So or maybe he made sure to keep an eye out, like maybe look into her after this. Because oh, you just come and happen to see Ivan? I'm wondering what that's all about. Nevertheless, she learns from Ivan about a memo that Nathan wrote about problems with the rig. Interestingly enough, I completely missed that last episode. I thought that was stuff that was all in Ivan's head, the whole terror situations. No, what went down is exactly what went down in the rigs. I thought that was just kind of his brain compensating. It's no, that whole terror thing did happen, so there is potential for that to still happen again. Because I was thinking oh, maybe it's just because of the state of mind he was in. It's no, what went down in that rig could easily happen again, especially what they're digging up if it gets and infects other people. And I mean, there's a full city nearby of New Orleans, so that could easily infect an entire city. So I'm curious. I'm also curious, once again, does it affect different people in different ways? Because obviously it leaked out that substance, whatever it is that they're digging that we still don't really have a name for. We know it gave Tandy and Ty their powers. So, but I mean, to be fair, when we saw everyone else, it didn't really do anything to them. But maybe that's because they got infected with a direct hit from it, whereas Tandy and Ty got theirs from the eruption. Maybe it was a very diluted version that gave them their abilities, or maybe it's because of their respective situations, like her situation with her dad, her adrenaline pumping, and his doing the same because of the old Billy situation that kind of made it have different side effects on them. Maybe potentially, I don't know, but it is kind of interesting to know, because like I said, I thought that was all in Ivan's head, but it's no, that legitimately happened. And once again, like I said, could set up to be something else entirely soon. Like I said, we've never had, Ivan's the first experience we had of them kind of entering someone's mind, which would be kind of interesting to see later on, which kind of comes up later on in the episode, but I'll get to that soon enough. So I almost thought it was kind of neat though, when she actually went to Ty's house. That was the first time they've ever been to each other's respective homes in a sense. Well, technically, because Ty's always come to her place, which is the church. But it's kind of interesting because there's a whole introduction between his parents and Tandy, and just kind of that little weird situation. It's kind of wow, your girlfriend which is kind of funny because your girlfriend has not even been introduced to them yet, and you kind of introduce Tandy. It's just kind of funny when you think about it in the grand scheme of things, but it's just kind of her being friendly and stuff like that, which there's stuff about that I'll kind of talk about when I talk about Ty's side of things. But I love that it was her kind of checking in on him, because his day is just as important to him as it is to her, because they both lost someone, and it's it was kind of also to steal from his mom, to steal her Roxxon car, which I didn't realize she worked at Roxxon. Maybe that came up earlier, but I was always wondering, what position does she have or something? Because it's somewhere in the back of my mind, I was thinking, is she a mayor or something? It's no, she works at Roxxon. There were probably stuff earlier mentioning it, but I never remember them really expressing, I figured, maybe a businesswoman or something, but I feel like they never expressly said what she did exactly. But maybe this is maybe this was our first time really getting to know that. Like I said, maybe they brought it up earlier. I just never really paid too much attention. Maybe it kind of glossed over. I kind of glossed over it or something. But nevertheless, it's kind of sad because it's yeah, she came there for ulterior motives, but at the same time, it is kind of a sweet gesture. Which, once again, the sweet gesture is kind of cut down a little bit because she had ulterior motives. But the fact that she snuck in and confronted Peter, which was kind of a very interesting thing. I mean, for one, just the way she went all badass and just started cutting all the boxes to the lights and stuff like that. And so catching Peter off guard like that and confronting him about everything. about him still trying to play a little dumb about things. What was even interesting is the fact is he's like, oh, you're talking about me besmirching the name of your father? It's like, did you even really know your dad? And which really pissed her off, which now he's got to peek at her powers because she summoned up the Decker like right there in front of him. So, I mean, he already got a glimpse at it already, but I'm sure this is him just seeing it kind of pop out of nowhere. With all the evidence she's gathered up, the memo, pieces of the rig without the shielding and stuff, because that also shows that he was cutting corners and stuff like that. So it was kind of really interesting too that he actually tried to buy her off too. I thought that was kind of interesting. But I was like, oh, here's money for you and your mom. There was a part of me wondering like, well, will Tandy actually take it or not? But for her, it's like, no, you asshole. This is about clearing my dad's name. If you want to give me anything, give me my dad back. And then like as she's walking out, she slices one of like the supports to like, I guess there's a building under construction that they're in, and it started coming down a little bit. So I mean, luckily for him, he managed to get out before probably anything collapsed on top of him. But I was like, that's kind of pretty badass. And I was almost like, because like obviously I'm skipping around here, but it's like when it came to both sides of their things, I was kind of like, isn't this a little too soon to be jumping? Because it's like, oh, things kind of worked out. I was like, I wasn't expecting that. I was like, because part of me in my mind, I was thinking like, what's probably going to end up happening is that Tandy's mom is going to find those papers and stuff like that and evidence and give it over to Roxanne. I was like, oh man, she's going to have, don't tell me you're going to have one of those terrible moments of you're going to do that and you're going to try and take all the money and it's going to ruin everything. I thought that's what's going to happen. Entirely and completely wrong. We see both Ty and Tandy join her hands at like the memorial that they were having for Nathan, and to see her mom in a theater, and it's just kind of like, oh yeah, like looking at like this perfect image of what their family was like. But then Tandy cuts the screen, and I like the little transition into black and white and kind of reveals the truth. Her dad was kind of an asshole. Like she slipped up a little bit, and then he slaps her. So because the fact of the matter is two things. One, we never actually found out why she was on pain medication in the first place. Now that kind of goes back, you're like, oh, that seems like that might be a little suspicious. Maybe it could have been something domestic that kind of led to her kind of being like she got severely injured to the point she had to be on medication. Now we also know why she probably drinks a lot too, is because it was just kind of her way of dealing with it. I mean, this is one incident, but that does, I mean, who's to say their whole entire marriage wasn't full of this? And in that moment, that was enough to kind of break Tandy, like, you know, her hope, you know. It's kind of like, oh, she was kind of like, she always had a vision of what her dad was. I mean, to be fair, once again, it's like he's your dad. Of course you're going to have like rose colored glasses. Plus you were a little girl at the time. Of course you weren't going to see everything that was going on at the time. And so now that she saw that different light of her dad, and I think it makes her sympathetic to her mom even more, because now she understands why her mom kind of was the way she was, why she kind of fell apart, because her way of dealing with everything she was dealing with Nathan kind of continued even after him. So it just kind of, she was already falling apart, had already fallen apart because of everything that had happened to her. And I think those habits of drinking and stuff like that just kind of stayed with her, and just kind of maybe it's still her way of dealing with everything that had happened. Because when Tandy actually, because we kind of saw Tandy's journey from the beach where her and Ty ended up at after everything, and she found her way home and found her mom passed out. And it's like, well, that's probably why. You know, like I said, it just makes Tandy's mom's situation even sadder, just because it's like, well, one, you thought it was like, oh, maybe she got addicted to pills, and then just then kind of spiral from there. But it's like, no, it seems like there's even more to it than that. And that actually inspires Tandy to actually give all the evidence away to Peters to get paid, which is kind of sad, because like, oh man, she went through so much for her dad, but now it's like, in her eyes, her dad isn't the perfect man that she thought he was. Because it also makes her question him at Roxanne too, because it's like, I mean, maybe she doesn't even think past that. It's like, you hit my mom, like that's enough for me to say F you. But maybe it's also because in somewhere in her mind, it's like, maybe my dad wasn't a great person I thought he was. Maybe he had some fault with the whole Roxanne situation too. Because in her mind, it was like, oh, these people at Roxanne, you know, like I said, when Ty was, you know, kind of getting to know her in her head and stuff like that, that for him, it was like her dad was, you know, being attacked and being killed by these Roxanne people. But now, you know, once again, now that kind of spins everything in a different light for her, you know. So, because I'm worried about it too, because it's like, for one, well, we don't know what the backlash could be for that, like what that will turn into in the future, because it's like, for one, where Roxanne can now continue on without anyone stopping them. Now, like, any mistakes they made with the rig, they can easily continue without anyone getting in their way. All evidence of any misdoing they did is gone. Any justice for anyone in the rig and any justice for Ivan, completely gone, you know? Because I also feel like this also puts, once again, and I brought this up last episode, I guess, because luckily for Ivan, he doesn't remember much from at the time, like after the rig explosion. He just kind of remembers what happened at the rig, but not much afterwards. So he can't really do anything against Roxanne. So he's kind of a safe bet to just like, oh yeah, we'll let him go. But still, you never know, they could potentially come back after him. Because it's something I thought was kind of super sad is that Ivan, you know, obviously he has his daughter to look after, and you know, he has so much to lose, and you have Tandy being like almost envious of him, because at the very least you have something to lose for her. It's like, it's kind of all or nothing for this. Like, there's nothing that she could lose beyond this, which sadly she ended up losing more, like her belief and faith in her own dad about this whole situation. But nevertheless, you know, but the point I'm trying to make is I feel like this will put a target on his back. I definitely feel like this will put a target on Tandy's back, because I feel like Roxanne's not going to want anyone knowing anything about this. So we'll see what will ultimately come about this. Like I said, like we saw what happened to Greg from just looking into this, like, because I forgot that was the other thing of like, yeah, I know exactly that you sent people to kill Greg. So it's like, it's not a question to say, even though they pay you off, that they won't still come after you anyway. But we'll see. Maybe they'll leave you alone for now until they feel like you are too much of a hindrance to keep around. So we'll see. Then on the other side of things with Ty, his situation is really sad too, because for him, it's like, because on this day, like his dad's like, oh, so what's your plan, son? And he's like, really? Today you're asking me something like that? And he's like, and his mom's like, well, what do you mean? And he's just like, never mind. It's like for his parents, because even when Tandy came over, his parents, like no one had an actual plan for the day about like, oh, celebrate, like, you know, doing anything for like Billy's like anniversary, you know, of his death, because for them, and I guess you kind of get the feel for it, it's because it's too much. Like they're both handling it in their own way, because Ty's dad is just kind of bringing friends over, and it's almost like this weird awkwardness between him and his wife about this whole situation. So it's kind of like, it's like the subject of Billy's death is like kind of something not spoken about. And I guess for Ty, like it never really is. I guess it's just kind of like we just ignore the big elephant in the room. I guess that's his way, his family's way of grieving. I mean, like I said, everyone handles things in their own way, and I guess this is his way of handling it. I mean, at least their way. So that's why he was kind of all about joining, you know, Tandy and her mom at the memoriam that they were kind of, the anniversary memoriam they hold for Nathan. Then at the same time, we had the whole thing with O'Reilly. Like Connors has a sketch artist draw a picture of Ty, and O'Reilly's kind of like, oh man, I don't know what that's all about. And then Ty gets this plan upon seeing his dad's friends come over and stuff like that. His dad like crying, like holding the cloak that Billy was making. Like I said, like it seeped out. He wasn't out like I said, it's such an unspoken thing that both are probably grieving in their own way. We never really got to see it with his mom, but most definitely. And it's so sad, like, you know, for Ty, like his way of handling this, he's like, I've got to take matters in my own hand because O'Reilly isn't getting him the results he needs to. So what he does is, hearing what O'Reilly says, that, you know, Connors seems like he's shaken, so Ty decides to use what he does best, what he does, and that's utilize people's fear to force Connors into a confession, which O'Reilly brings in Fuchs into this, which is so interesting because it's like, oh yeah, like that. This is, everyone is being brought in, you know, between the situation, because he told O'Reilly that he wanted to help bring Connors down with this whole situation, and Ty ended up showing them what he's capable of, which I thought was so interesting. I was like, is it just not going to work in front of them? Because he's talking about like pretending to be Billy's ghost. He even went through the trouble of making a shirt similar to Billy's and like putting blood on it and holes in it to make it look like the gunshot wounds and everything. I was like, wow. And the plan actually went off without a hitch. Actually, he did a very good job playing the ghost of Billy and just kind of popping in and out, bringing his fear to the surface by touching him, taking his gun at one moment, then popping back in and putting it back. I was like, wow. Like, because a cloak, I guess, helps him focus his power. It's kind of interesting because when he was talking to the dude, that one of his dad's friends, kind of like, what's the difference between a cape and a cloak? A cape is just kind of an add-on. You just attach it to a shirt. But a cloak, it holds you tight. And once again, it's just kind of interesting to me, especially because that's Billy's cloak. It's almost like Billy's there kind of cloaking him in a sense. And I just love how he utilizes that. And even working with O'Reilly, Connors kind of makes himself feels like he's a little crazy, especially because they're like, oh yeah, here's that. Yeah, it's like, what do you, no, that's not the kid I add to sketch art. That's not the kid I saw. It's like, yes, it is. This is the same one you asked the sketch artist to draw. And he was like, wait, what? And there's a picture of Bill. I was like, oh, that's super good, making him seem nuts. And then like, you have Ty standing there and she's like, I don't see anything. And Connors is just running and they force a confession out of him. I thought, wow. Like I said, that went off without a hitch. That worked perfectly. I was kind of worried that something was going to screw up at some point. A side note, you got to give major props to like Ty, because I think it's like, well, outside of Ivan's brain, this is the first time we've seen his powers kind of get like fully utilized like that. Like I said, it hasn't really, well, it seems like obviously because we see it, it's kind of a small thing, but when you see it in the episode, like Tandy throws her dagger. So any experience she got inside of Ivan's head has carried over. I mean, obviously it's their mind, and I guess you can think of it almost as mental training. But I guess the same thing applies to Ty too, because it was easier there. But I think because of that, he's still got a little bit more control over his power. But I think the cloak helps him get even more control. It's a lot easier to use it that way rather than just kind of outright summoning it up. But yeah, they got the entire confession taped, and I was like, yeah, that probably isn't going to work out well. I'm just thinking, like, that just seems a little, I'm like, that seems a little too easy. There's no way that's going to be settled with already, is it? There's got to be more to this. I was kind of sure someone was going to come in there and just steal the evidence, which, hey, doesn't mean that still won't happen. But it's kind of like, oh, yeah, man, it's all handled. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. What I thought was very fascinating, folks, is kind of like, hey, like, but what that kid's able to do. But then you have O'Reilly being like, oh, yeah, I'm from New York. Which is like, well, as you can tell with the MCU, a lot of stuff has a tendency to go down in New York. So, and then she also makes references. She's like, yeah, I should one day tell you about my friend Misty. I was like, wait, what? Is she referencing Misty from Luke Cage? That's the only MCU Misty I'm aware of. I mean, I guess it's because Misty knows Luke, and that's, you know, Luke's kind of a big thing in Harlem, so I guess that's one thing. Not unless there's another MCU, like, well, not just MCU, but Marvel Misty she could be referencing. But that's what I kind of feel, that's so interesting, because I feel like outside of the Netflix stuff, you never hear other TV shows. Like, I mean, like I said, this is like the other than Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., that's kind of like the only other, like, connected Marvel thing. So it's just kind of interesting. But nevertheless, it is kind of sad when it's all said and done and O'Reilly comes home and finds Fucks in the, I keep feeling weird every time I say his name, finds him in the refrigerator, which is like, that sucks. I figured there would be some situation to go down with that, but I didn't expect it to be like that. I mean, to be fair, we know this corruption runs deeper than just Connors, because his uncle covered it up. So like, there's like a big, heavy amount of corruption around that whole situation. So it's like no surprise, but man, that sucks. It's like, this is the dude that you love, you know, because it doesn't seem necessarily like Ty told his parents about it. He was probably going to wait, or maybe he kind of already did, or at the very least within that time frame between this happening, he is like, by the time we get to the next episode, maybe he tells them about the whole situation. I mean, because it will kind of solidify a lot of what he's been like, yeah, I'm not crazy, mom. It's like, also, I guess because it's already a hard time for them, he doesn't want to make it harder, so maybe he just wants to give it a little time. But, you know, once he's fully arrested and, you know, taken to court and stuff like that, then I want to say Billy, Ty would tell them, but I don't know, ultimately we'll have to wait and see on that. So, but that's crazy. Once again, it's something I am curious about. Will we see a combination of the two worlds coming together, like both Ty's situation and Tandy's situation kind of becoming one and the same, which they kind of are to a certain extent, because the rig exploding is kind of what set everything in motion for both of their lives. But still, I feel like I'm curious, will they always kind of say separate things, or will they kind of bleed over? As the Roxxon thing helping with like the corruption thing when it comes to police, is like there's something kind of going hand in hand with that, or not, or is it just they're two separate issues? Either way, I'm very excited to see what the next episode has in store for us. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about in this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and good